is where a legend was born. They're down 13 points with 3 minutes to go. This is where a legend was born. Drives in on Kaylee Heckle, passes it in. There's a miss, then she goes and one. Realistically, should have got the assist there. Comes across, down 6, fading right, boom. 3-point game, 49 seconds to go.
23 seconds left, down 2 points. And she pulls up from Caitlin Clark range like it's nothing. That shot right there just changed everything. We thought we knew about the next generation of women's basketball, because while everyone's been laser focused on Juju Watkins and the usual suspects, a 19-year-old from Canada just did something we haven't seen since Clark's legendary COVID season heroics. And I'm not talking about just hitting a few deep threes. I'm talking about the complete package. The fearless shot selection, the impossible comeback attempt, the absolute refusal to let a game slip away against a top 5 program. Silas Swords just announced herself in the most dramatic way possible. Here's what has the entire women's basketball community buzzing. This wasn't some exhibition game or early season warm-up. This was Michigan down 17 to 20 points in the first half against UConn. Against UConn. You don't come back from that kind of deficit against Gino Auriemma's program. That's not how this works. Except nobody told Silas Swords the script. And when college sports media starts calling you the Canadian Caitlin Clark after a performance like this, you've done something that separates you from every other hyped prospect we see. If you believe the story behind the story matters, if you think we're witnessing the birth of the next must-watch player in women's basketball, hit that like button. It tells us you're here for more than just highlights. You're here for the moments that define careers before anyone realizes that's what's happening. Let's establish who we're dealing with here, because context matters. Silas Swords was already one of the best freshmen in the nation last season. Not Michaela Blake's level, not Joyce Edwards' territory, and definitely not in the same conversation with Juju Watkins or Sarah Strong. She was talented. Absolutely. She was a player who dropped 26 points against South Carolina in her very first college game. But she was still in that second tier of elite freshmen. Good enough to notice, not quite transcendent enough to obsess over. Fast forward to this season, and something has fundamentally shifted. Michigan found themselves in an impossible situation against UConn, down by double digits, facing one of the most disciplined defensive programs in the country, with their sophomore guard wearing a face mask due to an injury. Most players would use that mask as an excuse for an off night. Most players would defer to teammates and try to survive until the bench could regroup. Silas Swords decided to do the exact opposite. Her first bucket of the game set the tone, a pull-up 3 while wearing that face mask, just casual, just announcing that she was about to take over regardless of the circumstances or the opponent. And here's where it gets interesting, because many of you have been saying this in the comments for weeks. You've been noticing something about her game that the mainstream hasn't caught onto yet, that unorthodox scoring ability, that willingness to take shots that make coaches nervous but somehow go in anyway, that complete disregard for what the situation supposedly allows.
Star-making performance from her. We might have seen a star-making performance in a loss from Silas Swords. And Silas Swords last year was one of the best freshmen in the nation. I'll say one of the best, because I don't know if I'm not going to go out there and say she was Michaela Blake's good, Joyce Edwards good, or or Sarah Strong good. But I'm gonna be honest.
Because that's exactly it. She's unorthodox. When she's not shooting the 3, she's finding angles and creating space in ways that don't follow the traditional playbook. And that Michigan comeback, the one that nearly shocked college basketball, was built almost entirely on her back. They were down 13 points with 3 minutes remaining. 3 minutes. Against UConn's defensive scheme and veteran leadership. Watch this sequence carefully, because this is where legends get made. Swords drives on Kaylee Heckle, one of UConn's best defenders, and passes it inside. There's a miss on the layup, and most players would blame the teammate or hang their head, not Swords. She just decided she's the one who's going to drag this team back into it. She comes off a screen, fading right, and drains it. 3-point game with 49 seconds left. UConn scores. Pressure's mounting, clock's ticking, and she comes right back at them. Another screen, fading right again because they still haven't figured out how to stop it. Boom. 2-point game with 22 seconds remaining. At this point, UConn knows exactly what's coming. They have to. They design an inbound play specifically to lock her down, to take the ball out of her hands and force someone else to beat them. Silas Swords comes off a flare screen, and UConn's defense reacts perfectly. So she just goes left instead, pulls up from deep, from Caitlin Clark distance, and buries it. That's the shot everyone's talking about. That's the moment that has people rewatching old footage from Clark's COVID season. That's the moment that made the comparison impossible to ignore.
Went in the Big Ten tournament last year. Which, yeah, comes in, steps into it, boom. And she's just very unorthodox with how she scores in general. When she's not shooting the three, she's just unorthodox. But again, their comeback, a lot of it was off the back of Silas Swords. And again, it's...
Now let me take you back to why this matters so much. Because the parallel isn't just about shooting from deep or having confidence. During the COVID-restricted season, Iowa had 6 players available. 6. They're down 12 points with 6 minutes to go against Michigan. And Caitlin Clark just goes into another dimension. She's pulling up from distances that shouldn't be legal, hitting shots that have no business going in, single-handedly dragging her team back into a game they had no right winning. They still lost that game. But that performance is what made people realize they weren't watching just another good college player. They were watching something different, something generational. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what happened with Swords against UConn. The unorthodox scoring ability, the willingness to take and make impossible shots when the game is on the line, the complete disregard for the deficit or the opponent's pedigree. Even the fact that both performances came in losses doesn't diminish what we witnessed. These are the games that separate good players from potential superstars. These are the moments that get referenced in draft coverage 4 years later when analysts try to explain when they first knew. And here's what should terrify the rest of women's college basketball. Silas Swords isn't just some hot-shooting sophomore having a career night. She's already one of Canada's best players on the national team. She was on the Olympic roster as a high school student. Didn't play much, obviously, but the fact that she was there, the fact that Canada's coaching staff believed she belonged in that environment at 17 years old, tells you everything about her trajectory. When you ask who the best scorer on the Canadian national team is going to be in 2 years, the answer is probably Silas Swords. She's been a really good player for the senior national team already. She's already one of their best players despite being a teenager playing against WNBA veterans and international professionals. This is genuinely the closest thing we've seen to a Caitlin Clark development trajectory since Clark herself. Drop a comment right now. Tell me if you think Silas Swords can actually become the next face of women's basketball, or if we're getting ahead of ourselves comparing anyone to Caitlin Clark. Because I want to hear where you stand on this. Are we witnessing the birth of the next transcendent star, or is this just one incredible game that we're overanalyzing? Let's talk about it. Now let's address what this means for the 2028 draft class, because this is where the conversation gets really interesting. Everyone remembers how stacked the 2024 class was. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, Rickea Jackson. That was supposed to be a generational draft class that changed the WNBA. But look at who's coming in 2028. You've got Silas Swords doing this. You've got Michaela Blakes, who is an absolute phenom at LSU. Joyce Edwards at South Carolina, who is incredibly talented, though, let's be honest, South Carolina's system means she'll never get the general public's attention the way these other players will. Dawn Staley builds championship teams with balanced scoring and suffocating defense, not highlight reel individual performances. And here's the wild card that could make this draft class absolutely insane. If Juju Watkins decides to stay in college for her senior year, If she chooses to spend one more season dominating college basketball before going pro, this class could legitimately rival or even surpass what we saw in 2024. The talent is there. The star power is building. What it needs is visibility. That's where Michigan becomes crucial to this story. Iowa, with Caitlin Clark, became must-watch television, not just for women's basketball fans, but for casual sports fans who don't normally tune into college games. That happened because of Clark's range, her personality, the way she played with this infectious joy and competitive fire. But it also happened because Iowa played an entertaining style that showcased her abilities. South Carolina wins championships, but they do it with defensive excellence and balanced scoring. That's championship basketball. But it's not what captures casual fans who want to see individual brilliance. Michigan with Swords and Olivia Olson could be the most watchable team in women's college basketball this season. Think about the teams people actually wanted to watch last year. Notre Dame had a stacked roster and played an entertaining style. USC obviously had Juju. Iowa had Lucy Olson trying to fill impossible shoes. But this year feels different. The talent has spread out more evenly across programs. There is no single dominant team that's clearly better than everyone else. That creates opportunity. Opportunity for a player like Swords to step into that spotlight and claim it. She's not just a volume scorer jacking up shots on a bad team. She's playing alongside Olivia Olson, who you could legitimately argue is the better overall player. More consistent, more well-rounded, probably more valuable to Michigan's success on paper, but Olson doesn't have this. She doesn't have the ability to take over a game in the final 3 minutes against a top 5 program and make you believe the impossible is about to happen. That's what separates good players from stars. That's what separated Caitlin Clark from everyone else in her class. It wasn't just the stats or the shooting range. It was the moments, the games where she elevated beyond what should be possible. The performances where you couldn't take your eyes off the screen because you knew something special was happening. And that's what Silas Swords just showed she has. Here's the thing about star-making performances. They don't always happen in wins. In fact, some of the most memorable ones happen in losses, because that's when you see a player's true character. When the game is slipping away and they refuse to let it go without a fight. When they elevate beyond what should be possible, given the circumstances. Caitlin Clark's Michigan game during COVID was a loss. But it's the game people remember when they talk about when they first realized she was different. It's the game that gets referenced in highlight packages and career retrospectives years later. The result didn't matter as much as what she revealed about herself in those moments. Silas Swords just had her version of that game, down big against UConn, wearing a face mask that would give most players an excuse to have an off night. And she nearly pulled off a miracle. The fact that Michigan ultimately lost doesn't diminish what she accomplished. If anything, it makes it more impressive because she didn't have the supporting cast to finish what she started. She did everything one player could possibly do in that situation. Now the question becomes, can she sustain this? Can she build on this performance and turn it into a season-long statement? Because that's the difference between a moment and a movement. Caitlin Clark had that Michigan game and then proceeded to dominate for the next 2 years. She eventually broke the NCAA scoring record. She became the biggest star women's college basketball has ever seen. She changed what was possible for the sport in terms of viewership and cultural impact. Swords has the talent. She has the moment. She has the platform at Michigan with national television games and the spotlight that some programs will never provide. She has Olivia Olson taking some of the defensive pressure off her. She has Canadian national team pedigree that gives her international credibility. What she needs now is consistency. She needs to show that the UConn game wasn't a fluke or an outlier. She needs to prove that when the bright lights come on and the stakes are highest, she's the player you want with the ball in her hand. And based on what we just watched, based on how calm she looked pulling up from 30 feet with the game on the line, I think she's ready for that challenge. The 2028 draft is still 4 years away, That feels like forever in sports time. But remember, we're watching these players develop in real time. We're seeing the moments that will define their careers before they even know that's what's happening. Caitlin Clark probably didn't realize that Michigan game would become legendary. She was just trying to win. Silas Swords probably doesn't realize yet that this UConn performance might be the one people reference when they talk about when she became a star. She was just trying to complete an impossible comeback. But that's how these things work. The moments choose you as much as you choose them. So here's what I'm watching for the rest of this season. Can Michigan become a legitimate contender with Swords and Olsen leading the way? Can Swords maintain this level of fearlessness and shot-making against elite competition week after week? And most importantly, can she handle the pressure that comes with being called the next Caitlin Clark? Because that's a burden as much as it's a compliment. There will probably only ever be one Caitlin Clark. The circumstances that created her stardom, the perfect storm of talent and timing and personality and platform, that's not something you can replicate. But if anyone has a chance to capture even a fraction of that magic, to become the player that casual fans tune in specifically to watch, it might be Silas Swords. If you want to see how this story develops, if you want to be there for the moments that define the next generation of women's basketball, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because we're covering every step of this journey. The breakout performances, the struggles, the draft implications, all of it. That UConn game was just the beginning. The real test starts now. Can she handle the expectations? Can she deliver when everyone's watching specifically to see if she's the real deal? Stay locked in. We're about to find out together.